First 5 years he was in the league, he was the greatest goaltender that ever played. I mean, nobody will ever surpass his talent. I mean, you could throw a handful of rice at him and he'd catch everything.
I remember Bobby Hull let a shot go, and boy, he had a big curve on a stick and hit him on his shoulder. And he's laying there on the ice, and Bobby Hull was supposed to, you better stay down, Terry. There's more coming at you. And he got up and won the Stanley Cup. There was nobody like Terry Sawchuk to me. He was a great guy.
Just how good he was.
He'd crouch and just dare you to put the puck, and you couldn't put a P by him. When he wanted to play hockey, nobody was any better than Terry.
103. That is the number of shutouts Terry Sawchuk recorded across his career, a record that stood untouched for 37 years. He played without a face mask, crouching low like a predator, daring every shooter in the league to beat him. His right arm was shorter than his left. His spine was curved from years of that same crouch. He could barely sleep 2 hours a night from the pain, and yet no goaltender in NHL history controlled a crease the way he did. Gary Bergman, his teammate in Detroit, said it best. "You couldn't believe what he did. He looked like he couldn't walk normally, but once he got into that net, he became someone else entirely. It was the most terrifying focus I have ever seen." This is the story that reveals the most terrifying truth about Terry Sawchuk. Not his reflexes, not his records, but what he chose to do with his final breath. The night of April 29, 1970, in Long Island, New York. The season had just ended. Sawchuk, now a backup goaltender for the New York Rangers, was sharing a rented house in East Atlantic Beach with his teammate, Ron Stewart. After a night of drinking, the two men got into a heated argument over shared living expenses. The dispute moved from words to a physical altercation on the front lawn. In the struggle, Sawchuk, already worn down by years of depression and alcohol, fell and landed directly on Stewart's bent knee. The impact caused catastrophic internal injuries, a severely lacerated liver, and critical damage to his gallbladder. He was rushed to Long Beach Memorial Hospital and underwent 3 major surgeries in a desperate attempt to stop the internal bleeding. Shirley Fischler, a sports journalist who visited Sawchuk in his final days, described what she saw. He was so thin and pale that the famous scars on his face seemed to disappear into fragile skin. But here is what made the story truly unforgettable. Despite the unbearable physical pain, Sawchuk used what little strength he had left to protect his teammate. From his hospital bed, he stated clearly, "It was just a freak accident, a complete accident. Don't blame Ron Stewart. I was the one who started the whole thing." On May 31st, 1970, Terry Sawchuk died from a blood clot. He was 40 years old. People feared Sawchuk because he could stop any shot. But what was truly terrifying was this. Even at the moment of death, he was still shielding someone else. In 1966, Life magazine ran a feature on NHL goaltenders to show the world exactly what it cost to stand in that crease before face masks became standard equipment. For that story, they brought in a makeup artist and a physician. Together, using Sawchuk's actual medical records, they recreated every stitch he had received across 16 years of professional play. The result was more than 400 individual marks mapped across his face, running from his eyebrows down to his chin. The photographs looked like something out of a horror film. But here is the detail that makes it truly disturbing. In real life, those scars had healed. They were barely visible. Sawchuk had simply moved on, absorbed the damage, and kept playing. The reconstruction did not reveal something hidden. It revealed something he had already forgotten about. Beyond his face, the physical toll told an even grimmer story. His right arm was 2 inches shorter than his left, the result of a childhood fracture that was never properly treated. 60 bone fragments were still lodged inside his elbow. His spine had curved permanently from years of the signature crouching stance he pioneered. Zach Plant, the legendary goaltender who became the first to wear a face mask regularly, understood this cost better than anyone. He once said, "Imagine going to work, and every time you make a mistake, a red light goes on and 18,000 people scream at you." Sawchuk lived with that pressure, with an unprotected face. Sawchuk himself addressed his injuries with characteristic dark humor. "We're the kind of people who made health insurance popular." In the spring of 1952, Terry Sawchuk was 22 years old and playing only his second professional season. What he produced in that year's Stanley Cup playoffs remains one of the most statistically dominant stretches any goaltender has ever delivered in postseason history. The Detroit Red Wings swept through both the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens without dropping a single game, 8 consecutive wins to claim the Stanley Cup. Across those 8 games, Sawchuk allowed just 5 goals total, posting a goals against average of 0.63 per game. He recorded 4 shutouts, all of them on home ice at Olympia Stadium. The opposing rosters were not weak. He was staring down Rocket, the most feared scorer in the league, along with Max Bentley of Toronto, names that defined the era. Sawchuk later described one pivotal moment against Bentley. "I knew Max Bentley was going to try to fake me, so I decided not to move. He passed to Smith, and I just managed to kick my leg out to stop the shot. That was the moment I knew we were going to win." Charles L. Coleman, who documented that era of NHL history, wrote simply, "Sawchuk played brilliantly and completely dominated the Leafs." Detroit general manager Jack Adams was equally direct. "Thanks in large part to Terry Sawchuk, this is the greatest team I have ever had." At 22 years old, he had just delivered a playoff performance that coaches and historians would still be referencing decades later. During the 1964 playoff semifinal between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Chicago Blackhawks, Terry Sawchuk was not in the arena. He was in a hospital bed. A severely pinched nerve in his back had forced him out of the lineup and into medical care in the middle of the most important stretch of the season. The pain made normal movement difficult. Walking was a struggle. By every reasonable standard, he had no business being anywhere near a hockey rink. But when the team needed him for Game 3 of the series, Sawchuk told the doctors he was leaving. He drove directly to Olympia Stadium, put on his equipment, and took his position in the crease. That night, despite the pain that accompanied every movement he made, he stopped 26 shots and kept the net completely clean against Chicago. When the final buzzer sounded, he said nothing to the press. He quietly removed his gear, left the building, and returned to the hospital to continue his treatment. No speech, no headlines sought, just the work, and then back to the ward. His teammate Gary Bergman, who witnessed it firsthand, could barely find the words years later. "You couldn't believe what he did. He looked like he couldn't walk normally. But once he got into that net, he became someone else entirely. It was the most terrifying focus I have ever seen." That single sentence captures what separated Sawchuk from everyone else who ever played the position. By the spring of 1967, Terry Sawchuk was 37 years old. In goaltending terms, that is ancient. His body had absorbed 2 decades of punishment, and yet, when the Toronto Maple Leafs needed him most in the playoff semifinal against the Chicago Blackhawks, he answered. Johnny Bower was shaken up during the game and could not continue. Sawchuk came off the bench in the second period and stepped directly into the most dangerous situation in the series, facing Bobby Hull, whose slap shot was the fastest and hardest in the entire league. At one point, a hole shot struck Sawchuk directly in the shoulder, dropping him to the ice in immediate pain. The arena went quiet. Everyone watching assumed he was done for the night. He got back up. He kept playing. Toronto won the game. Sports journalists covering the series called it the most heroic performance ever seen from a goaltender in that era. Think about what that means. A 37-year-old man with a curved spine, damaged elbows, and a body held together by sheer will stood in front of the most powerful shot in the NHL and refused to leave. That is not toughness. That is something that does not have a clean word in any language. 103 career shutouts. That record stood in the NHL for 37 years, from the moment Sawchuk retired until Martin Brodeur finally surpassed it in 2009. 447 career wins held the same way, untouched for 30 years before Patrick Waugh broke through. In his first 5 seasons in the NHL, Sawchuk led the league in wins every single year. No goaltender in history has matched that streak. He accomplished all of this while playing 60 to 70 games per season with no backup, wearing protective equipment that would be considered laughable by modern standards, and carrying a body that was, by any medical measure, falling apart. Emile Francis, a respected general manager of that era, stated it plainly. Sawchuk was simply the greatest goaltender who ever lived. The numbers do not argue. They just sit there, unchanged, and dare anyone to disagree. Terry Sawchuk never played it safe. He gave his face, his spine, his sleep, and ultimately his life to a position that demanded everything and apologized for nothing. Gordie Howe, his longtime teammate in Detroit, said it best. The Uke was the greatest goaltender I ever saw. Everything a goaltender should have, he had. He did not just stop pucks. He owned the game from inside that net. In your opinion, where does Terry Sawchuk rank among the greatest goaltenders of all time? Leave your answer in the comments below.